College football preview, week 5. Texas, Iowa State on Thursday, September 28th, first game of the week. I'm taking Texas in this one. I think it'll be a close game, though. I think Texas definitely, their defense is playing better than it was game 1. Um, Iowa State really hadn't played a whole lot of people. Their losses to Iowa. Iowa was it was a close game, and then Iowa, barely lost to Penn State last week. So, we'll see what happens with the Cyclones, but I think Texas will win. Miami Duke, Duke's 4-0, unranked. Miami is definitely the favorite. I think Miami will win this game, but Duke could definitely give them a little bit of a run. Some other ones that game was on Friday. The Duke Miami game. Also on Friday, USC, Washington State. Real excited about this one. This will be a real good one. USC has definitely underachieved, I feel like, this year. They haven't really played that well so far. And Washington State, they've played really good the last 2 weeks, but at the same time, they really haven't played anybody. When they had to play Boise State a couple weeks ago, they definitely struggled with them. Luke Falk struggled. I think biggest storyline of this game, how will Luke Falk play against USC's defense? And I'm thinking USC will win the game. I'm sure Sam Darnett will come up big late like he usually does. Vanderbilt, Florida. Vanderbilt, like I said, got slaughtered by Alabama last week. Alabama looked really good last week. Florida barely beat Kentucky on a real late play. Late in the game. I'll take Florida to win this game. I think it'll be a close game, though. I think Vanderbilt played better than they did against Florida. Against Alabama. I'll take Florida, though. Maryland, Minnesota. Minnesota's 3-0. They're looking to keep that streak going. They're playing Maryland. Maryland lost to UCF pretty handily last week. I'll take Minnesota to win the game. Northwestern, Wisconsin. This is a game in the first of the year I was real excited about. I thought this is a game that Northwestern could come into Camp Randall, win it. They were off last week. So they, had an extra week to prepare. But at the same time, Wisconsin was off last week too. I definitely think Wisconsin wins this game pretty easily. Been more impressed with them than I have with Northwestern at the first since the first of the year. North Carolina, Georgia Tech. North Carolina has been in every game that they've played. They've just lost them close. But I think Georgia Tech and the option will get it done. You know how I am. I really like the option games. Houston, Temple. I think Houston wins. I don't really know why I even said anything about that game. Syracuse, NC State. I think this could be a pretty good game. I'll take NC State at home. Eric Dungy will probably have a pretty good game for Syracuse. Syracuse has some good prospects. If you're going to watch this game, watch out for them. Georgia, Tennessee. I'll definitely take Georgia to win. I think Tennessee will play them close. We'll see if Eason plays this week. We'll see if Fromm continues to play. Fromm has been great thus far for Georgia, coming off the win last week at Mississippi State. They just really jumped on Mississippi State early, never really let Mississippi State get any ground, and then Mississippi State offense wasn't working. Baylor, Kansas State, Baylor played a pretty good game against Oklahoma last week, gave them a run for their money. Had it pretty close. I'll take Kansas State at home, though. Special teams and defense, I think, will definitely get that one done. Indiana, Penn State. I put this one on here. I wanted to at least, I think Indiana's not a terrible team, but I'll take Penn State for sure at home. Penn State's really tough at home. Florida State, Wake Forest. Florida State's 0-2. I've dropped them out of my top 25 power poll. They definitely could still maybe be there. It's just with the fact that their quarterback situation, I know that Florida State will win games this year and they'll get it together, but it's one of those things, it's like when you have a new quarterback, it's like a game within a game. So, first off, there's teams that are just trying to win fucking games. And then there's teams that are fucking trying to win a game inside of a game, and that's basically trying to get your quarterback to understand how the game works. And Florida State's still at that level right now with their 6'5", 180 quarterback, and he got thrashed against NC State. Bradley Chubb threw him around. But Wake Forest is 4-0. They had a close game against App State. They hadn't played anybody all year. I think this is definitely a game Florida State could jump on and win. But we'll see what happens. Wake Forest has had a pretty good defense the last couple of years. Navy, Tulsa. I'll take Navy for sure. Tulsa's 1-3. They've had some tough games this year. I wasn't high on Tulsa, though, at the first of the year with the people that they lost in the offseason. Lost a lot of weapons. I'll take Navy for sure just to run all over them, that option attack that I love. Arizona State, Stanford. Both these teams are 2-2. I think Stanford definitely wins this game and gets propelling in the right track into the Pac-12 season. Stanford will be one of the top teams at the end of the year, most likely. It just depends on how they play against teams like Washington, Oregon, Washington State. If I think those are the teams that they have to play in their division. Iowa and Michigan State. Michigan State's honestly favored in this game. They're at home, but I'll take Iowa to win on the road. I was really impressed with Iowa last week. Big Ten games are really hard to understand sometimes because they're so different than other leagues in the sense of the defense is really what owns it. And when I say that, you have these really low-scoring games that are nothing like the college football games of like the Big 12. The Big 12 has high-scoring games. Pac-12 at times has high-scoring games. I will say the Big Ten is the one conference that always, if two good teams face each other, it's usually a pretty close game, pretty low-scoring. And this is what we got last week with Iowa-Penn State. Really good game. McSorley won on the last play of the game. Just really, really impressed with him. Really impressed with Shaquan Barkley. It hit 211 yards that he had. I mean, they rode him the entire game. Another guy that I was impressed with, that I've been impressed with, and I think he really climbed up draft boards, was Josie Jewell. He really can help a defense out. He can stop, their best player or one of their best players, or hold their best players definitely at least accountable. Compared to most stars in college and football, they basically run the defense. You got to put two people on them. I think Josie Jewell's an exception where he can play that guy, or he's legitimately a playmaker on the defensive side of the ball. I really like him. Some other games next week: Mississippi State, Auburn, 2 one-loss teams. They're both 3-1. I think Auburn will win this game. I think Mississippi State they are not they're not a ranked team. They just had a lucky game against LSU. Let's see. Memphis, UCF, these are 2 undefeated teams in the AAC. I'm going with Memphis this game. UCF's actually projected to win. They're at home. Scott Frost done a good job with that team thus far. I'll take Memphis though. I like Memphis. I like Riley Ferguson, and I like Anthony Miller. South Carolina A&M, 2 3-1 teams. A&M's actually the favorite at home. Both of these teams have injury issues. A&M with their quarterback, they have their basically third-string quarterback, Kellen Mond. South Carolina, they do have a quarterback. They finally found their quarterback in Jake Bentley, but they don't have Deebo Sanders. I don't think Deebo Sanders played last week in their close win against Louisiana Tech, and I don't think he'll play this next week either. Ohio State, Rutgers, I think Ohio State will thrash them. Ohio State, Texas Tech, I'm excited about this game, but I think it's Oklahoma State's turn to ruin some people's season, and this week it'll be Texas Tech's season that gets ruined. I think Oklahoma State goes in and slaughters Texas Tech. Washington, Oregon State, I'll take Washington for sure. Clemson and Virginia Tech, this is a really good game, but I'm actually going out on a limb with this one. I'm taking Virginia Tech. I like what I saw out of week 1. I like their young quarterback that they have. He's a real good player, and I really like Bud Black and his defensive scheme at Virginia Tech. Not to say I don't love Brent Venables' defensive scheme at Clemson, but I'm taking Virginia Tech at home. I think this is the year that Clemson can take a loss and still make it to the playoff. But I don't know why. I'm just taking Virginia Tech. I'm feeling Virginia Tech. The way that Clemson played last week, they played really good against Louisville, which I thought they would. I was not really impressed with the way they played against Boston College. That was a 7-7 game going into the fourth quarter. They're in Blacksburg. It's a good defense. Clemson's offense, it eventually gets going. But if they have to face a team that jumps on them, they could potentially not go in their favor. So I'm taking Virginia Tech this week over Clemson. And then Alabama, Ole Miss. You always got to kind of put this one on the schedule. Always got to watch it. Ole Miss is probably Alabama's kryptonite in a sense. Ole Miss is always the team that gives them a loss. I don't think it's going to happen this year. Alabama looks really good, and they're at home. I think they'll win for sure. Colorado, UCLA, 2 teams that need to bounce back. Been thoroughly disappointed in UCLA this year. They should be 1-3. They should have lost that game to A&M. Colorado looked good at the first of the game. I thought it went about how I thought it would go. Washington just jumped on top of them, just more talent everywhere. Quarterback just kind of seemed Steven Montes, I think is his name. He just didn't really. He made some mistakes early. Washington's defense, if you make mistakes on Washington, their offense capitalizes, and that's exactly what happened. Washington looking pretty good. Cal, Oregon, this is a game that I usually wouldn't have been talking about at the first of the year, wouldn't give a crap about, but Cal has been the big surprise team of college football this year. They're 3-1. They honestly didn't play that bad against USC, but at the same time, USC's kind of been a surprise team in a bad way. With the way that they have honestly played this year, they have really been unimpressive. Their best win is to a 2-2 Stanford team. And Oregon lost to Arizona State last week. Really disappointed me. I really felt like Oregon could be on a run to be a legitimate powerhouse again, and they lost the game to Arizona State. Arizona State's a team that's been reeling as of lately. Lost to Tech last week, lost to San Diego State 2 weeks before that. I very thought this was a winnable game for Oregon, even though it was at Arizona State. So I was disappointed in that. What's his name? Wilkins, Manny Wilkins, I think is his name, I think his name is Manny Watkins. He plays for Arizona State. He had a really good game. N'Keal Harry had a really good game too. Talk about some other games from last week. Like I said, Stanford, thrashed UCLA. And this is really sad because Stanford doesn't have a quarterback. They don't really run the ball every down type. They don't really, Bryce Love is he breaks it big like McCaffrey. He's not a big ground and pound guy. So I really thought UCLA could win this game. They had Josh Rosen. I mean, they used three different quarterbacks. I think Stanford, when you're using three different quarterbacks, to me, that's the most legitimate sign that your team needs help when you can't even figure out your quarterback position. Those are the easiest teams to beat for me, are the teams that don't have quarterbacks. But they couldn't do it. Disappointing. I think Jim Moore is definitely on his way out. Washington, Colorado, kind of said it a little bit that, Arizona State won by 2 against Oregon. Oregon did come back. Oregon was losing by a good amount, and Arizona State kicked a field goal late, and then Oregon couldn't score. Notre Dame slaughtered Michigan State. Michigan State just didn't look that great coming into it. Notre Dame, looks like a top 25 team. Their only losses to Georgia. Like I said, the Penn State-Iowa game was probably game of the week. Florida-Kentucky was another good one. Florida won late on a touchdown. San Diego State Air Force. This was a really good game. This was like a monsoon. They had to stop the game in the second quarter. And Air Force was playing really good. They were up 9-0. San Diego State couldn't get anything going. But then after that delay that they had, everything changed. San Diego State scored, I think, 2 touchdowns real quick after that, and they were able to win the game late. Air Force took a lead 24-21 pretty late. And then San Diego State was able to get the lead back and hold on 28-24. Real good game. So San Diego State is still undefeated, and they move into my power rankings this week. LSU-Syracuse was actually a pretty close game. LSU was kind of fucking around there using their freshman Brennan at quarterback some. Geist didn't play nearly at all. I think he's dealing with kind of an injury. They're saving him for big SEC play. Like I said, Georgia slaughtered Mississippi State. They just didn't come to play. Oklahoma's defense looked really suspect against Baylor. Dealt with a couple injuries too. I think I saw Jordan Parker. I think his name is Jordan Parker, went down, their cornerback. Gave him a lot of big plays. This could be a team that you watch out in the next couple weeks. If they have an opponent that could really thrash them, watch out. Oklahoma could be in trouble. Michigan, Purdue played them really good in the first half, but Michigan just kind of took over in the second half. Purdue was having a lot of issues. They were playing both their quarterbacks. O'Korn was playing quarterback for Michigan. Wilton Speet went out with an injury. And for Purdue, their guy that they've been using most of the year, Blug or whatever his name, Balog, he didn't even play. They lose the other guy, and I don't really like him as much. Navy handled Cincinnati, just jumped on top of Cincinnati. Miami jumped on top of Toledo. This was actually a pretty good game though. Toledo was down 10-0, but then they took a lead 16-10. But then Miami just kind of got on top of them. At one point, it was 38-30, pretty close. But then Miami was able to get on top again. Wake Forest came back against App State to make them 4-0. Duke was able to come back against North Carolina, win by 10 late. Like I said, Clemson ended up winning 34-7, but it was 7-7 going into the fourth. Nebraska bounced back this week and beat Rutgers by 10. TCU Oklahoma State was a big game this last week, and TCU basically just they jumped on Oklahoma State pretty early. They drove down the field, kicked a field goal. Then I then they had a turnover or something. Oklahoma State had a turnover. TCU got the ball back. They were only kicking field goals, and I'm thinking, okay, this isn't good. You had 2 possessions right by the goal line. You need to get in. You need to get in the end zone in at least one of those, and they didn't. Then boom, 86-yard touchdown from Mason Rudolph to James Washington. They're back in the lead, but then TCU, started stopping them. They had a fumble, and at halftime going into it, it was 20-10. And then second half, they came out, scored. Darius Anderson, the running back that replaced Kyle Hicks, with Kyle Hicks out, had a huge game, 160 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran all over Oklahoma State. I think one of the biggest questions we didn't ask ourselves about Oklahoma State and the fact when they were playing nobody for they hadn't played anybody in the last 3 weeks. They played Pitt and they slaughtered Pitt, so we're like, oh, this is a big-time team. Maybe they are big-time. Well, Penn State destroyed Pittsburgh too. And so you kind of thought as a measuring stick, okay, Oklahoma State's pretty legitimate. But then, what we got to see, though, is like whenever they had to face a team when they're actually in a game, their offense didn't play as well. It didn't execute like it needed to. And then also the defense couldn't hold up that end of the bargain. That was something that we didn't know about because we thought, oh, yeah, Oklahoma State, their defense might hold up the end of the bargain. We'll see. And I kind of felt like, yeah, they're going to hold up the end of the bargain. They'll be able to hold up for the offense. And the offense scores so many points, they should be able to. And that just wasn't the case. 27-10. Then it was 27-17. It looked like they had a little bit of life. They got the ball back, but then before you knew it, it was 34-17, and then 37-17. And they did, at the end, they did come back. They scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth and got it close, but then TCU got the ball back and was able to score. It was a real good game, but I was surprised Oklahoma State lost. I picked Oklahoma State going into the game. They were at home. Mason Rudolph was hot as hell. Definitely one of my big surprise games of the week, them going down like that. NC State beating Florida State was another surprise. I wasn't thoroughly surprised. I almost picked NC State in my pick 'em during the week because that quarterback situation, but I just didn't because I was like, man, Florida State's defense, though. Like, every time I think about Florida State, I'm like, oh, but their defense. I'm like, oh, their defense is so good. But, it just didn't happen. Texas Tech, Houston. Honestly, I picked Houston to win this game. Houston was at home. Kyle Anderson, number 1 pocket passer, recruiting the ESPN 300 back in 2014. Man, I thought they had it. But Nick Shamanek, who literally doesn't throw the ball past 10 yards. Every little short pass. Kingsbury does a great job of, he takes the balance away from the defense. He'll put He'll put like 2 wide receivers on the left, 2 wide receivers on the right, but then he'll send one in motion and he'll get the balance all off, and then he'll throw it to that guy on a little short thing. So he gets he always is using advantages against the defense and stuff. He's always using his receivers with motion and stuff like that. I really liked what I saw at Texas Tech's offense, and they only gave up 24 points. This was the thing that also was pretty impressive was the fact that they won a game that they only scored 27 points in. Usually when Texas Tech doesn't score more than 30, they lose. And I was impressed. It was more about Houston shooting themselves in the foot, but Tech did get a pretty big lead in the second half, I will say. And A&M, Arkansas, real good game there, man. A&M was able to come out on top like they do every year against Arkansas. I talk about this game every year. I feel like, and I remember talking about, I think beforehand, it's always a big game, always a big rivalry. And this year I was like, I'm picking Arkansas. Usually I pick Arkansas. Usually it looks like Arkansas can win the game. And then you get to the game and then Arkansas just can't handle. And this is, again, and this is so sad because A&M has Kellen Mond at quarterback. His quarterback is just not ready. And they still can win. Somehow they still win. I feel bad for Brett Bimello in Arkansas. He's got the big hogs and whatever, and they still suck every year, and he's going to have another season of 6-6 or 7-5, beating some, losing some in the SEC. It's tough being a coach in the SEC, I feel like. And then the last game that I'm talking about the week, it was the first game of the week, Utah, Arizona. Tyler Huntley went down with a shoulder injury. We'll see what happens with that. Troy Williams came in. He was the starter last year. He came in and he threw it pretty well. I honestly liked Williams last year. So I was kind of surprised that they had a new quarterback, but Huntley has played very well this year. He really likes Darren Carrington, wide receiver transfer from Oregon. But yeah, Utah, this was a defensive game. Utah was always leading by about 10 or so. They're up by 10 or 3 for most of the game. Brandon Dawkins is basically all Arizona's offense, him running the ball. And they took a 10-point lead in the second half. Then Arizona was able to come back a little bit. And then They go back up by 10. Then they kick a field goal. They're up 30-17. You're thinking, oh, this game's about over. Then Arizona scores late, and then they get an onside kick. And so they got the ball, and if they score a TD, they've got about, I think, 2 minutes left. If they score a TD, they win the game. So this was actually a really close game, and then Arizona, I think, either turned the ball over or threw a pick. I think they threw a pick, and that was the end of that. Tennessee barely beat UMass this week. Tennessee has for sure been one of the worst, surprise bad teams with the way that they've played this year, I'll say.